Zach, thank you so much for joining me here in the podcast, Roteirices, to talk about Palestine. It's super urgent that people must be aware of what's going on. Western media is not showing what's going on, especially in Brazil, where I'm from. So if people don't go to social media and they don't try to find ways to get real information, they will get only propaganda. So I've been following you on Twitter for a few weeks, and I'm really impressed about the content you've been sharing. And so that's the reason I invited you to this conversation. So I would like to start asking you to introduce yourself.
My name is Zachary Foster. I am a historian of Palestine, did my PhD in Palestinian history, and I also am the founder of a website, a platform called Palestine Nexus, where we publish um, articles on Palestine, past and present, what's happening on the ground right now in Gaza, for example. We publish many writers in Gaza, and we also publish articles trying to provide historical context for the present moment. For example, that piece you see there on the eugenicist history of Zionism. I try and provide historical context for understanding what's happening today. And we also have courses. We teach courses on the history of Israel Palestine and Zionism and anti Zionism and the Palestinian people. And we're just generally trying to provide educational materials. We also have maps and documents and newspapers and other archival documents available as well. So that's a general overview of Palestine Nexus.
Okay, so here we have the courses. I'll leave the link on the information on the podcast information. So I really recommend you guys to take a look and take some of the courses if you can. So here you have articles, a lot of good stuff here, and books as well, right? No, not books yet, right?
Uh, Well, the research tab there does include links to files with manuscripts, newspapers, archival records, maps, etc. I have never published a book, so you're not going to find any books to buy on this website published by me. Um, but hopefully, in the next coming years, we'll have a book out.
Okay, one of yours maybe would be great.
Exactly.
Okay, so Zach, the idea is to, as you are a historian, to have an overview about Palestine. I know it's a huge content, it's really super complicated, and people, after like 10 minutes on social media, they think they are specialists and can talk anything about anything from both sides. But what could you tell us for people who are not aware, who doesn't know the story and are only getting propaganda about that, especially when you have this phrase, so it's a land with no people for people with no land, this kind of stuff, and it's part of the propaganda. But could you give us an overview about how Palestine started and what were the steps that led to what we are facing now in that region?
Big question. I'll do my best to answer it in a very brief way. You could say that the Palestine question began when a group of Zionists in Europe set out to establish a Jewish state, a so-called Jewish state, in a country that was 95% non-Jewish. Right in the 1870s, when Zionists first began to move to Palestine, to colonize Palestine, establish agricultural colonies, establish Jewish settlements, Palestine was 95% Palestinian Arab, 95% Muslim and Christian, and it was about 5% Jewish. So let me ask you this, Carlos. How do you build a Jewish state with a Jewish majority where those Jews are all working in Jewish only businesses and the Jews are all belonging to Jewish only labor unions and the Jews are all living in Jewish only colonies? Um, how do you plan to do that in a country that's 95% non Jewish? Well, from 1880 to 1948, the plan was to buy up as much land as possible and then evict the people living on that land because they weren't Jewish. So in the 1880s already, you have Zionists moving to Palestine, buying up land, primarily from absentee landlords, showing up to the land and finding tenants, Arab Palestinian tenants living on it. And what did they do? Especially beginning in the early 20th century, they evicted those Arab Palestinian tenants because they had the wrong religion. They had the wrong ethnicity. They had the incorrect religious, ethnic, national background. So they were evicted. And that was the case up until 1947. And by 1947, just backing up a little bit, the British, of course, establishes the Mandate for Palestine in 1920, which gets ratified by the League of Nations in 1922, which calls for transforming Palestine from an Arab country to a Jewish country. Even by 1920, Palestine is 90% Palestinian Arab. So the British adopt the Balfour Declaration, this declaration calling for a Jewish state in Palestine. And they encouraged Jewish immigration and Jewish land purchases in Palestine in the 1920s and the 1930s and the 1940s. And by 1947, Palestine is about 2/3 Palestinian Arab, 1/3 Jewish. So there's still a big problem. We went from 95% Palestinian Arab to 90% Palestinian Arab to 80% Palestinian Arab to 66% Palestinian Arab. But you still want to establish a Jewish state with a Jewish majority in a country that's 2/3 of Palestinian Arab. So what do? Well, in 1947 and 1948, the plan was to expel the Palestinian Arabs from Palestine. That was the proposed solution. That's how you solve the Arab problem, i.e., the problem that there are Arabs in Palestine. You expel them. And so after the partition plan was announced, in which the UN called for two states, an Arab state and a Jewish state, war broke out immediately. You get this internecine conflict between Jews and Palestinian Arabs in Palestine. In November 1947 and December and January 48 and February 48. And by March 48, the Zionists leadership led by David Ben-Gurion and Moshe Shertak and others, they decide to, they adopt a plan known as Plan Dalet to basically rid the country of Palestinian Arabs. It was a blueprint for ethnic cleansing. And they go village to village, really beginning in February and March, continuing along to April and May, and depopulate the country by force. They expel about 500,000, they depopulated about 400 to 500 villages, killing about 15,000 Palestinians and expelling about 750,000. And this is really the beginning of the story of Palestine and really explains to such a great extent how we got to where we got to today, because now you have 750,000 Palestinian Arabs living in refugee camps, totally impoverished, right? They've been stripped of their means of livelihood. Their property was stolen from them. And many of them actually tried to return home. They wanted to reclaim property. They wanted to see family left behind. And what did the Israeli army do from 1949 until 1956? They adopted a shoot-to-kill policy where anyone trying to return home was shot at. And the Israeli army killed between 2,700 and 5,000 Palestinians in those 7 years after the establishment of the State of Israel, shooting at refugees trying to return to their homes because those refugees were of the wrong religion and of the wrong ethnicity. And that is sort of the founding story. I mean, we could obviously go much deeper and bring the story up to the present day, but basically that is the beginning of how we wound up in the mess we wound up in today.
Yeah, a lot of stuff. The 1947-48 episode is also known as the Nakba, the Arabic word that means the catastrophe. And I was reading a few stuff about that, especially like Ilan Papez, the Jewish historian writer who doesn't live anymore in Israel. I think he was banned from there. And it says how Israeli government started to get information from all the villages. They knew exactly how many people lived in each house, how many rooms each house had, how many trees there were in that house, in the surroundings, how many fruits in each. So it was like a huge espionage work. So when they get finally their state, they were able to find everybody and expel everybody. So I think it's important to know that it didn't came out of the blue in 47. Imagine how long you should be working to gather all this information and be able to go after these people. And I don't know if you can mention something when you mention, okay, 750,000 people were expelled. That was not like a, okay, guys, now it's Israel, go to another place because this is ours. Can you give us an idea what happened? Because we knew they had terrorist groups. When we see the so called settlers, quote under a lot of quotes, they are kind of terrorists protected by the army, by the IDF. When I see the images on social media, like teenagers attacking old people, elder people, and people ask, why didn't they counterattack? Well, maybe because they are using machine guns and they have the army behind the cameras waiting to do something in return. So, what can you tell us about this? How these new settlers connect to those guys in the 40s, late 40s and 50s. And who are these settlers now? I read that they are coming from New Jersey, here, from Brooklyn, from Europe, and they just got a call. Okay, now we have a house here in the West Bank. You just can come, you just come and get your new house. How this work?
Well, just to clarify one point, in the 40s, there were multiple Jewish militias. The British called them terrorist organizations, in part because they targeted non-combatants. They killed about 91 British civil servants in 1946 in the infamous King David hotel bombing. They put bombs in Arab marketplaces and Arab buses in the 1936 to 39 period. So they committed all kinds of horrible atrocities. And then they were folded into the Israeli army in 1948. And the
That's the
Israeli
base, the basis of the Israeli army, right?
Well, yeah, exactly right. The main primary militia in Palestine was the Haganah. This was a militia that was armed, uniformed, trained, funded by the British government itself in the 1940s, and especially during the revolt from 36 to 39. And then those militias, together with the Palmach and the Irgun and the Lehi gang, they effectively formed the Israeli military in 1948. They were all collapsed into the Israeli military. Now, as to the question with regards to the settler militias roaming around the West Bank, this has been a problem for a long time. There's nothing new about this, but it's gotten dramatically worse over the past couple of years. These settler militias, they form a loose coalition of settlers. They have a number of organizations and institutions. One of them is called Tag Mechir, which means price tag. It's a gang, really, mostly constitutive of violent youth. I would call them terrorists because they go around terrorizing Palestinians as a day job. They wake up in the morning. I've met some of these people, and they wake up and they go to their neighbors' homes who are Palestinians and terrorize them. They have coffee on their porches. They send drones over their flocks of sheep to intimidate them and terrorize them. They destroy their property. They set fire to their cars, and they physically assault them and they shoot them. And in some cases, and in many cases, they murder them. And in many cases, they murder them on camera. And there has been, I cannot recall the last case when an Israeli terrorist was brought to justice for this violence, for this terrorism, for the murder. In fact, just a few weeks ago, was it a month or two ago, we saw a Palestinian living in the town of Susia.
For people who are only on the podcast, I'm showing some footage on Twitter. This is a group of so-called settlers arsoning cars, trucks, and factories.
That's right. This is a phenomenon that goes back many, many years, indeed many decades. But I would say since 2022, things have gotten dramatically worse because in late 2022, a new government came to power. That was the government of Benjamin Netanyahu, whose finance minister Bezalel Smotrich doubled as the minister of the West Bank. And so he effectively became governor. He became, I would almost say, emperor over the lives of 3.5 million Palestinians live in the West Bank. And he has, together with Itamar Ben-Gvir, the national security minister in charge of the Israeli prison system, in charge of the Shabak, the Israeli equivalent of the FBI.
With himself a settler, right?
who is himself a settler, who himself was banned from serving in the Israeli army because he was deemed too radical, too extremist. This is decades ago. So he was actually convicted on terrorism charges, incitement to terrorism. He was closely linked with the people who assassinated then Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin in 1995. And so he together with Smotrich have been some of the primary supporters of these settler terrorists who go around carrying out acts of terrorism. And when they do carry out acts of terrorism, when they murder Palestinians, in some cases on camera, Ben Gvir goes and celebrates those acts of terror. And he goes and, in the case of the Israeli settler who murdered Hawarith, a Palestinian from Susia, on camera about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, Ben Gvir, I think, went and congratulated him in public, encouraging more terrorism, encouraging more violence against Palestinians, completely defenseless Palestinians who, if they do anything to defend themselves, if they so much as throw a stone in response to the violence and the terrorism, they'll be oftentimes just murdered on the spot instantly. And then as they're bleeding out, the Israeli army will prevent ambulances from reaching them. And this happens all the time. I mean, this is the state of affairs on a daily basis. If you go and look at some of the most recent reports by B'Tselem, the Israeli human rights organization, you will find that there were something like hundreds of Israeli terrorist attacks, what are settler attacks in the West Bank in just the past month. You're talking about an average of a few dozen attacks every day, right? I mean, just do the math on that. Dozens of attacks per day, wherever you are in the West Bank, whether you're a Palestinian in Area C, in the Jordan Valley, in places like Homsa in the north, or in the E1 zone around Jerusalem, or in the south Hebron Hills, in places like Susia and in the south and the South Hebron Hills, you will be attacked. But if you're in Area B, you will also be attacked because Area B is increasingly coming under encroachment by the Israeli settlers, backed by the Israeli army. Just a few days ago, the Israeli government announced its largest annexation of land for archaeological purposes in its entire history. They're effectively annexing about 30% of the Palestinian village of Sebastia, which is located in Area B, meaning it's supposed to be, according to the Oslo Agreement, under Palestinian control, at least Palestinian civilian control. Well, even now, even that is being taken over by Israel. And you can expect more settler violence there as well. And then we haven't even mentioned Area A, where the vast majority of the Palestinians in the West Bank live. In Area A, about 40,000 Palestinians have been violently uprooted from their homes in the Nur Shams, Tulkarm, and Jenin refugee camps over the past year. This process began in December 2024, over a year ago. The Israeli army entered those three Palestinian refugee camps and went door to door and just expelled everyone from their homes in the middle of the night, literally by gunpoint. I've spoken with many of them. They said the Israeli army was banging on the door at 3 a.m. People were woken up in the middle of the night, violently thrown out of their homes, and just said, leave and go. And men separated from women. The men are physically assaulted, and they're just forced out. And they've been homeless for almost a year now. So that's
there's an image here about Netanyahu condemns settlers' attacks. So what could you say about this? So hypocrite.
A few days ago, there was this coordinated campaign of posts, not just from Netanyahu, also Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz posted, as did a number of other Israeli senior officials and ministers. And it's unclear why exactly they all posted. What is clear is it was coordinated, which means there was a reason they're doing it. And if I had to speculate, my guess is that as part of this Trump quote unquote peace plan, which is obviously not a peace plan, it's an occupation plan, it's a genocide plan, it's an ethnic cleansing plan, it's a starvation plan. It's not a peace plan. But according to this plan, I think Netanyahu understood that he was trying to coax the Gulf states and some other Muslim states like Indonesia, like Pakistan, maybe Algeria, right? He was trying to coax a number of these regional powers and Arab states to support the plan and to maybe even send troops as part of this, this I don't know what to call it. What is it being called? Some international force that will enter Gaza to apparently to disarm Hamas. What Israel failed to do over the past 2 years. Now a group of Indonesian, Pakistani, and Saudi and Emirati soldiers are going to come into Gaza and disarm the Palestinian resistance factions that Israel failed to do. But in any case, maybe he's trying to coax them or cajole them to send troops, and this was a kind of something that they asked Trump to ask of the Israelis to do in response, or so who knows what it could be. But clearly, these were presumably statements that were made because Trump applied pressure on Israeli officials to make them. Why exactly Trump applied that pressure? Who was asking Trump to apply that pressure? We don't know, but that would be my speculation.
Yeah, terrible. And one question, this ceasefire, I've seen some stuff saying that cease only for Hamas or the Palestinians and fire for Israel. What can you, of course, don't have a crystal ball, but what would you foresee for this situation there? Because I can't see anything happening then they taking Palestinians completely out of there, because Gaza is on that situation. I don't know if they are going to send like this international force there, and who will be in charge. So we'll have a kind of situation. I think Israel doesn't want anybody there, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to do everything and anything they want to do. So we will have like an international force there, and one day they will start shooting Israeli soldiers, and they will come back. So they will witness what's going on, all the issues they have. And on the West Bank, Trump said, okay, we're not going to annex West Bank, but it never happened. Day by day, they are expelling people, they are destroying houses and everything else. What do you foresee? Can we have any kind of hope? What hope can you have about that?
In Gaza, there will be no international force. I can't imagine any of these countries would agree to accept a mission to disarm Hamas. That's not going to happen. They don't want to disarm Hamas. They don't want to be involved in a project which the Palestinian people themselves reject. They understand that that's not going to that's not going to bring them any good graces, and they're just, I mean, forgetting about whether or not they would even be able to achieve the mission. They have no desire to engage in a mission which involves disarming Hamas, certainly against the will of Hamas. So that's never going to happen. And in fact, I think the reason why Israel allowed for like, Israel has no desire to see international force, any kind of international force enter Gaza at all, right? Because then it sort of it's losing control of the situation. Israel wants to be in complete security control of everything. So this is not in Israel's interest. And so I think the reason why Israel accepted this 21-point plan is because they understood very well that this international force would never come into existence, or certainly not if its mission was going to be to disarm Hamas. So there will be no international force. It will never enter Gaza. And if it does, it will be in some kind of ceremonial role. It will certainly not pursue a disarmament of the Palestinian factions. And so what will happen as a result, I think, or in lieu of that force, is that I think people forget that the most likely thing to happen is what is already happening. What is already happening now is what will continue to happen. So what is happening over the past couple of weeks? Israel kills on average 7 to 10 Palestinians per day. This is, if we call it a ceasefire, it's obviously not a ceasefire. They kill about 2 children every day, so they'll continue doing that. The Palestinian people will continue to struggle with shelter. Israel is denying any kind of permanent shelter from entering Gaza, any kind of like new tents. Any kind of these sort of temporary mobile homes and other kinds of construction materials is not coming in. You saw the footage over the past few weeks of these horrible rainstorms and Palestinians sleeping in flooded tents. I mean, it's just horrific to see this footage. And so the Palestinians will continue to suffer. Israel is still blocking trucks. So maybe you've seen an average of 100 trucks a day. It should be 600. So Palestinian diet are continually being put on a diet. And Israel is continuing, by the way, to kidnap Palestinians both from Gaza and the West Bank. And so everything we've seen over the past weeks of ceasefire will continue. In the West Bank, And just one final point: this yellow line is going to get consecrated. That's what we've already seen, right? This so-called yellow line. It doesn't actually exist in reality because there is no line. Palestinians don't know where it is because it's not marked on the ground, and so
And
and it's
Israelis
constant,
are moving the blocks every day.
and it's constantly being moved. And even if there is a marker, Israel will shoot. Israel creates a buffer to the buffers. So if you enter a zone that you don't know exists, you will be shot and killed. And so this yellow line, I think, is Israel's pushing the front line closer, further and further into Gaza. We've seen them do this already multiple times since the quote unquote ceasefire was signed. So I think the Palestinian population, the area in which the Palestinian population can live, will continue to shrink. And then in the Israeli controlled area of Gaza Strip, which is 55 to 60% of the Gaza Strip, Israel has empowered 4 gangs. One in Rafah, I believe that's the Abu Shabab gang. He's a terrorist. I mean, I would call him a terrorist. He's a drug dealer. He's a murderer. He runs a gang of a few hundred drug dealers and murderers and gang members who are cooperating with the most genocidal country on earth. That would be Israel. You have another gang in Khan Yunis, and then you have another gang in eastern Gaza, and then a 4th gang in the north in Beit Lahia. So those gangs, Israel will try to empower them. It will provide them weapons. They will do Israel's dirty work. They will act as they will act as they will be carrying out Israel's orders in those parts of the Gaza Strip. And it seems like the plan is to build what are effectively concentration camps. These are, Israel would call them humanitarian zones, where Palestinians will enter. They will not be allowed to leave those zones unless they're leaving Gaza permanently forever. They will be given a certain amount of rations of food. The plan is to concentrate them into these areas in the south of the Gaza Strip, primarily, right, in Khan Yunis and Rafah, and then eventually push them out. That's Israel's plan. It was the plan Israel announced in October 2023, more than 2 years ago, when a 25-page document leaked from an Israeli think tank associated with the Israeli military, in which they called for the total ethnic cleansing of the Gaza Strip. And that continues to remain the plan to the present day. As far as the West Bank goes, Israel continued to crowd Palestinians into smaller and smaller areas of the West Bank, exactly like they're doing in the Gaza Strip. They've already pushed out Palestinians from dozens and dozens of villages and herding communities around Area C. They will continue to do that. They will continue to take over more land in Area B, which they've done. Just as we said, they annexed a huge swath of land in Sebastia, and they will continue to depopulate areas in Area A as well. So the reality of the Palestinian question right now is Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank, and I would even add Jerusalem, and I would add Israel proper to this, are being forced into smaller and smaller cantons, smaller and smaller Bantustans, where their ability to develop an economy, to live a normal life, to have any kind of political institutions will shrink. Israel will suffocate life, prevent them from freely moving around, concentrate them in the smaller and smaller areas, and ultimately with the ultimate goal of pushing them out of Palestine.
Yeah, we could say that this is happening under the complicity of international community. But when you say international community, it's too vague. If it's everybody, it's nobody. We have to give names. So it's the US, England, France, Germany, who are still supplying guns and giving all the political support, because this wouldn't be happening if they didn't want to. So what can we imagine about this? Why these countries are allowing Israel to do that?
Each country has its own interests. In the case of the United States, the U.S. government is beholden to a lobby, loosely known as the Israel Lobby, a coalition of very powerful special interest groups.
Is that the APAC?
That would include APAC, that would include Christians
Could
United for
you just
Israel.
explain very quickly what is APAC for people who is not aware of that?
Yeah, it's a pro-Israel lobby in the United States. It tries to get the United States to...
Since the 60s or the 50s?
It really gained power, I would say, in the 1980s, but has been around since, I believe, the late 60s. I think you could say the United States really shifted its policy towards Israel after the 1967 war. And increasingly over the past 5, 6 decades, it has become more and more pro-Israel. I mean, you might say just very recently things have begun to shift a little bit, but certainly over the course of the 80s, 90s, 2000s, the United States government was the...
Sorry, basically, AIPAC gives money to American politicians to support Israel, right?
They do donate through these super PACs and other vehicles, because they can't donate to political candidates directly, but they donate to campaigns. The United States has a complex financial kind of arrangement for funding political campaigns. So you have these vehicles known as super PACs, which any corporation, any individual can donate an unlimited amount of money to. Right, the United States government, in a Supreme Court decision 20 years ago, determined that money is speech. So if you have money, you should be allowed to use that money to fund a political candidate, but you can't do it directly. You have to use these super PACs. So, but basically, AIPAC donates. They put money in the pockets of pro-genocide and pro-apartheid candidates. They tried to unseat Rashida Tlaib in her 2024 campaign. They failed at that. They offered $20 million to both Nasser Beydoun and Hill Harper to run against her. They rejected the blood money, but of course they succeeded in unseating Cori Bush. They spent about $6 million to get her out of the U.S. Congress. They succeeded in unseating Jamal Bowman. I think they spent about $15 million on his campaign. So what they do is they fund the opponents of Israel's critics in the U.S. Congress and try and get them unelected.
These are the guys, right?
That's correct.
Twitter page. They have like 187,000 followers, and basically they are putting propaganda, pro-Israel propaganda, and attacking Palestine and all the unbelievable stuff, and putting money to many politicians. Like Ted Cruz is one of the supporters.
Yeah. It's not just the U.S. Congress, of course, but it's also the executive branch. I mean, if you go up and down the executive branch and you look at people like U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who was bought and paid for by Israel lobbyists his whole life. He entered, I think it was Paul Singer who originally funded his campaign, who was a lifelong Israel firster. Then you have U.S. Secretary of State Pete Hegseth, who is a Christian Zionist, and said in 2019 that the Israeli government should pursue steps on the ground, should establish facts on the ground to replace the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest site in Islam, with the construction of the third Jewish temple in Jerusalem, what is effectively a call for World War III. That's U.S. Secretary of State, U.S. Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth. Then you have U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, who is another Christian Zionist, who is a fanatical Zionist, and who just actually met with the man who spent 20, 30 years in a prison for selling secrets to Israel. Why is his name escaping me at the moment?
This came from the U.S., right? I think Benjamin Netanyahu received him at the airport.
Yes, what's his name? It's escaping me. It's embarrassing. In any case, Mike Huckabee has said
the guy is American, right?
Yeah, he's American. He's an American-born Jew who spied on the United States on behalf of Israel for decades. He sold some of the United States' most important secrets to the state of Israel. Jonathan Pollard, thank you. And he just had a secret meeting with Mike Huckabee, U.S. Ambassador to Israel. I mean, can you imagine the U.S. government, a U.S. government official at the rank of an ambassador? Let's say someone in China or someone in Russia or someone in, someone almost anywhere else, having a meeting.
And I saw this guy giving interviews on Israeli TVs, well, like blackmailing the U.S.
Well, he's a hero in Israel, right? I mean, he's a celebrity. He's a real celebrity in Israel. He spied for Israel and spent 30 years in prison because of it. So he's considered a hero.
45 people are not watching, but who said he spied for Israel is the New York Times, right?
Yeah. So no, no one disputes this or debates this. He confessed to it, I think. So
yeah, he was convicted. He was arrested.
Yeah, he was convicted. So that's Mike Huckabee. Then you have Jared Kushner, who has no official position whatsoever, but who is the president's son-in-law and has been a key stakeholder in the most recent rounds of negotiations between Israel and Hamas, and the U.S. and Israel and Hamas, and Jared Kushner's quote unquote peace to prosperity plan, the version of his solution to the Israel-Palestine question that he put forward back in 2018, 2019 during Trump's first term. That plan calls for and envisages permanent Israeli apartheid, right? He believes that the solution to the Palestine question is putting Palestinians in a state of permanent subjugation, where they will never be able to control the government or have an influence on the government that controls their lives. They will be permanent subjects of the Israeli military. That's his vision for a solution to the Palestine question. Then you obviously have Steve Witkoff, the president's golf buddy, and I believe a real estate lawyer who's also a diehard Zionist and who has also been doing Israel's bidding for the past 4, 5, 6 months. I mean, recall that he has betrayed the Palestinians multiple times. You remember when he made that deal with Hamas to get Idan Alexander out of Hamas captivity. This was the American Israeli who was taken from an Israeli tank on October 7th. He was grabbed from a tank. So he's a prisoner of war. He's not a hostage. And he was held in Hamas captivity for almost 2 years. Steve Witkoff told Hamas, if you release Idan Alexander as a show of goodwill, we will get Israel. We will get Israel to open up the border and stop the bombing. I forget the exact, it was a verbal agreement, obviously, but what happened as a result of the release of Idan Alexander? Nothing. It was a bold-faced lie. He played him for a fool. And then what happened a few months later when Steve Witkoff was engineering another round of negotiations between Hamas and Israel in Doha, Qatar? What did Israel do? They attempted to assassinate the Hamas negotiators
during the negotiation
at a time when Steve Witkoff was luring them into negotiations. So Steve Witkoff has been acting on behalf of Israel to help murder Palestinian negotiators. So that's who Steve Witkoff is. So the entire negotiating team from beginning to end is composed of Israel firsters. The entire cabinet, Israel, Netanyahu's chief of staff, Netanyahu's Secretary of Defense, his national security advisor, his Secretary of State, his ambassador to Israel. They're all Israel firsters, every single one of them. That is who, I forgot the initial question, but by the way, the question was about AIPAC. Well, all these people are under the influence of AIPAC, not just AIPAC, but all of these Zionist organizations like the ADL, like the Conference of American Presidents, which represents most, if not all, of the major Jewish organizations in the United States. They're influenced by, like we said, Christians United for Israel. And they're, of course, influenced by the Christian right, the tens of millions of Christian evangelicals who support Israel for theological reasons, because they believe at the end of days, God will return, that if Jews congregate in the land of Israel, that will bring about the second coming of Jesus Christ, at which point Jews, if they do not convert to Christianity, they will burn in hell for all eternity. So that is the base of support for the state of Israel in the United States. And that's why AIPAC is in part so powerful. That's why Christians United for Israel is so powerful. And of course, the Jewish community as well is incredibly powerful and supports, on average, especially the Jewish billionaire class. They are Israel's, they are some of the most important donors, funders, and supporters of both Republicans and Democrats. We're talking about Miriam Adelson, Paul Singer, these Jewish billionaires, Bill Ackman, right? There's dozens of them, and they provide the financial basis of support that pushes both Democratic and Republican parties into a kind of a pro-Israel, pro-apartheid, pro-genocide position.
Unbelievable. I don't know how to start, but I'd like to show you this account here. It's what is better, because there's a guy, I can't remember his name now. I think he's in Arabic, a Jewish Arabic. He's been around in Manhattan, in New York, in Washington, D.C., going to the Congress, harassing people on Grand Central in New York, and going after congressmen in D.C. And he's always followed by like two huge guys. I don't know if these guys are Mossad, what are the guys are doing there to protect him. And he's like in provocation. He's provoking some kind of stuff so he can go to to the media. And I have an idea that, well, these guys are connected with this Betar. What is this Betar worldwide? It has a connection with the second, after the Second World War. There's a guy who started this movement. It's very violent, right?
Yeah.
And they are connected to many attacks in many places, and they are really strong. They have only 34,000 followers,
Yeah.
but they make a lot of noise. It's unbelievable the power they have. And I think it was Max Blumenthal.
That's
That
right.
he put a video, like a short documentary about these guys. Can you tell us a little bit about these people here?
Yeah, Beitar was the youth movement of the revisionist Zionists, which was a Zionist political party founded by J.F. Jabotinsky in 1923. The revisionist Zionists said, you can't. They said that the Palestinian Arabs see themselves as the indigenous inhabitants of Palestine. They're not going anywhere. They're not going to give up their land. They're not going to give up their rights. They're going to
They
resist.
were the majority 3,000 years ago.
Well, leaving aside 3,000 years ago, these revisionists were. Oh, sorry, that was a joke.
Yeah, it was a provocation. So, okay.
And the revisionist Zionists, they evolved into the Likud Zionists, the party of Benjamin Netanyahu, the current prime minister of the state of Israel and the chief genocide officer for the past 2 years. And so the revisionist party had this youth movement. This youth movement was known as Beitar. And Beitar was inspired by the Italian fascists, actually. Jabotinsky drew inspiration from these, like the SS officers and these Italian and German and Austrian fascists. They believed in blood and soil, right? We're going to colonize Palestine because it's our land, and we need to set up roots there. But anyways, that was the mentality of Beitar. We're going to fight. We're gonna fight for the Jewish people. It's this very aggressive, kind of violent movement, I would say. And they organized this youth movement. And today, Beitar, I think it was defunct for many, many years, if not many, many decades, but has experienced a kind of life after death over the past 2 years. I believe it was after October 7th, they were revived by this New York Jewish activist. And he in the documentary that you mentioned, talks about why he refounded or relaunched the Beitar movement in New York over the past couple of years. I think there's a post-October 7th phenomenon. And I believe, if I'm not wrong, they have played a key role in helping the Trump administration, and before that, the Biden administration, abduct and arrest students for Palestine speech, right? They did this with Rumeysa Öztürk, who was a grad student, a Turkish grad student, who was abducted off the streets in a harrowing video, was caught on camera, in which she was approached by plainclothes officers and abducted off the streets of Texas for having committed the crime of writing an op-ed in her student newspaper, calling on her university to adopt resolutions that were passed by student governments. That was her unspeakable offense, was publishing an op-ed, and she was abducted and imprisoned for weeks, if not months, because of that. Same obviously happened to Mahmoud Khalil. Same obviously happened to Muhyiddin, another Palestinian grad student, and there were many, many others. And many have suspected that it was Beitar that was handing the Trump administration lists of names of students. So they're deeply complicit in some of the most grotesque violations of free speech rights in the United States since the Red Scare in the 50s. And they just spread some of the most vile propaganda. I think they're also famous for handing out pagers as some kind of sick joke in commemoration of the thousands of Lebanese civilians that were maimed and wounded and killed last year when
Yeah, I
the
think
Israeli government.
Michael Finstein, the historian about the Holocaust industry, the writer, I think they have a video of giving him a pager on New York streets.
If you celebrate the October 7th attacks, if you celebrate an attack that resulted in the killings of many, many hundreds of civilians, you'll be branded a terrorist. You'll be banned from polite society. You will be deplatformed if you celebrate October 7th. But if you celebrate the pager attacks, in which the Israeli government killed a dozen some innocent civilians, they maimed and wounded thousands of civilians. It was the head of the CIA. He called it a terrorist attack because it was a terrorist attack. Because the purpose was to terrorize Lebanese society, and beyond that, it's a blatant and a flagrant violation of international law. Specifically, it's a violation of the prohibition of perfidy, which prohibits the use of civilian objects for military purposes. So what does that mean? You cannot use a civilian object. So a blanket, a pager, a cell phone, you cannot use as a
Yeah,
bomb. That's
that's the
called
image.
perfidy, and it's illegal in international law. And this was a textbook case of perfidy. So it was a classic act of international terrorism, and it's being celebrated in the open by Beitar.
Yeah, here you have the footage.
Yeah.
Norma
Finkelstein.
Finkelstein, targeted by Zionists. Let's see if I have some audio.
Yeah, exactly. They think it's a joke. They think it's funny. And by the way, it's not just Beitar. You had people like Mehdi Hassan go on CNN about as mainstream pro-genocide, pro-Israel outlet as you're going to find, in which guests on the show are jokingly asking him if his pager went off. They're joking about murdering an American political analyst on live TV. And this is the nature of these pro-Israel groups like Beitar. They think it's funny.
Yeah, and we have thousands of pages and accounts. This one is vivid and 467,000 followers. And they spend all day long. I don't know how many people are behind this page, like doing propaganda against Palestine. See, showing IDF and police, Israeli police attacking and punching people. This is Itamar Ben-Gvir. It's amazing. The minister, he went to an Israeli prison to harass the prisoners. And this guy is unbelievable. So this is one of those accounts that could be financed. Maybe it's from Israeli government, who will know. And there's a famous video, a recent one, about Benjamin Netanyahu meeting with some American influencers. And we get this information that they're getting like $7,000 for each post they publish.
Yeah.
Pro Israel. And Netanyahu saying, okay, TikTok is what we have to do. And you have, I don't know, people will say, okay, it's a conspiration theories and stuff. But there's a process, an ongoing process about TikTok being sold in the US for a Jewish guy, right?
Well, it already was sold, at least the US based version of that app was sold to Larry Ellison's Salesforce, if I'm not wrong. And Salesforce is owned by Larry Ellison, who is a billionaire, one of the richest people in the world. And he's a lifelong Zionist. In fact, he is the #1 donor to the Friends of the Israeli Defense Forces, which is a US-based nonprofit organization which raises money for genocide and sends it off to the Israeli military to carry out a genocide. So that's Larry Ellison, and now he owns the U.S. branch, or the U.S. TikTok app, and we've already had many journalists, media brands, and individuals come out and say their content is already being banned on TikTok. It's already happening. This is not something we need to use the future tense for. We can use the present tense, because TikTok is already censoring content related to Israel, related to the genocide. You have a very, very popular young American TikToker and Instagrammer and content creator. Your favorite guy is his handle on X. I forget his real name, but he is very young. He's, I believe he was a college student in Ohio. And he's said just in the past few weeks, his content, anytime he talks about, say, for example, Israel and Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein and talks about Jeffrey Epstein together with Israel, or he talks about Charlie Kirk and Israel, those videos are shadow banned. You can't. They will not. They are not pushed out. The algorithms effectively block them, and that's the case now with not just your favorite guy, but also the Gray Zone has reported that their videos are being censored or suppressed in the algorithm. So this is now, I think, the new TikTok. And if TikTok thinks that you can get people to unsee what they've been seeing for 2 years, I think they're sadly mistaken. If anything, it's just going to hurt the platform and the brand, and people will find that content on in other places.
It's unbelievable. Have you noticed that your content? I just follow you on X, but I don't know if you are working on other accounts. But have you noticed that you're reaching less people because of talking about Palestine and genocide?
I haven't noticed any suppression. I don't think I share things that would lead me to get suppressed. I'm pretty kosher in what I share. I mean, I don't mince my words. I call a genocide the genocide, right? But I'm generally speaking not saying anything terribly controversial, at least in my view. But no, I haven't experienced any repression on X as far as I know.
Okay, so let's talk about this other account. It's IDF Babes, and it's really interesting because it was established according to X, in August last 2014, also 11 years. And it's basically Israeli girls, Israeli soldier girls making sensual
Yeah.
pose. And
Yeah.
what is that about? Is to drag attention, to make war more palatable? I don't know. What is the purpose of that?
That's exactly correct. The IDF is the most genocidal army in the world, by which I mean it has been carrying out a genocide uh, for the past 700, 800 days without any respite, without a break. So you're talking about what other army in the world has been carrying out what Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, B'Tselem, Al Haq, Al Damir, the UN Special Rapporteur, multiple other UN bodies, uh, virtually every respectable human rights organization, Doctors Without Borders. We could list off the dozen most important human rights organizations in the world. They're all calling it a genocide. So Israel is engaged in what is becoming a consensus among what has become a consensus among human rights experts that it's carrying out a genocide. So how is it that you present your genocidal army to the world? Well, you show videos of cute Israeli soldiers dancing and singing and looking hot and pretty and sexy, and that's what Israel does. And it's been, by the way, there's nothing new about this. It's been doing this for decades. It's how Israel sells its apartheid and genocide, is through videos of young, hot, sexy men and women on the beach, having fun. That's how Israel sells itself to the world.
Crazy. Okay, Zach, we are almost finishing here because I know you have to go. But two last questions. You are a Jew, right?
That's correct.
How a Jew got engaged in a subject like that, bringing information, facts about Palestine? How this kind of thing happened? And I don't know about your family, if they are really into the Jewish stuff. They think you are a traitor of the faith. If you have Jewish friends, how this activism works in your personal life?
Yes, I have a Jewish family. Yes, they generally speaking support Israel. No, they don't support what I say and do with regard to Palestine. Yes, it's very, very difficult. No, I don't have any advice for other Jews and how to deal with their Zionist families. With regard to like how I got involved in Palestine work and Palestine activism, it was very gradual. I didn't wake up one morning saying I hate Israel. No, I'm actually deeply passionate about it, interested in, and concerned for the state of Israel and the Jewish people. That's why I do what I do. I don't hate Judaism. I love Judaism. I practice Judaism. I celebrate Shabbat. I've wrapped. For many years, I wrapped tefillin. For many years, I wore
Because
tzitzit
what
and a
is
orki.
happening there is not Judaism, right? You have to make a difference. What
Uh,
Israel is doing is not Judaism, right?
That is correct. Judaism is a 3,300-year-old religion based on the Torah and the Talmud and the Tanakh and the Mishnah and the Shulchan Aruch. Zionism is a 145, 50-year-old political ideology unrelated to Judaism. You can be a Jewish anti-Zionist, you can be a Jewish Zionist, you can be a non-Jewish Zionist, and you can be a non-Jewish anti-Zionist. And
You can
historically,
be a Jewish Nazi as well.
you can be a Jewish Nazi, you can be an Arab Nazi, you could be a German Nazi. There's no
Catholic
correlation.
Nazi.
Okay, you can be a Catholic Nazi, you can be a Muslim Nazi, you can be a Jewish Nazi. There's no historical correlation, I would even say. Forget about relationship. There's not even a historical correlation between Jews and Zionism. That is to say, historically, if you go back to the origins of the Zionist movement, let's say I think the fairest place to begin to talk about Zionism is really the 1840s, because that's when you had a movement in Britain to establish a Jewish state in Palestine. It was Lord Shaftesbury and Palmerston, two very important British officials. One was prime minister for 2 decades in Britain, who called for the establishment of a Jewish state in Palestine. So you have to go back, basically, I would say 180 years. So over the past 180 years, for most of those 180 years, most Jews around the world were hostile to Zionism. So there isn't even a correlation between being Jewish and being Zionist. If anything, and by the way, over the course of those same 180 years, there's a strong correlation between anti-Semitism and Zionism. Meaning, if you were an anti-Semite, you were likely to be a Zionist. And this was the case in Europe in the 1870s and 1880s and 1890s and 1900s and 1910s and 1920s and 1930s, all the way to 1939. So for the first 80 years of the Zionist movement, most anti-Semites in the world embraced Zionism. Jews, on the other hand, were initially hostile to Zionism for lots of reasons, for religious reasons, they were for assimilationist reasons, for humanitarian reasons. They were hostile to Zionism. And over the past few years, Jews are once again increasingly becoming very, very hostile to Zionism. 40% of American Jews call Israel's actions in Gaza a genocide. 40%. Now that data point is already many, many months old. Is it 45%? What will there be a majority of American Jews calling Israel a genocidal state? Will that be in a year from now or 2 years from now? I can guarantee it will be less than 5 years from now. Maybe it's already the case now. So even to say Judaism has a correlation with Zionism, that is, that Jews are more likely to be Zionist than not Zionist, even this will no longer be the case in a few years, a decade at most.
Okay, last questions. I'd just like to bring this image here. Motasen has been dragging a lot of attention lately because of this exchange. Now you can see where people are based. And Motasen, who is a Palestinian journalist living in Gaza, he's based in Gaza, but for any reason, his account shows that he's in Poland and he's been attacked. I interviewed him a few weeks ago. The full interview can be watched on my YouTube channel. I'll leave the link here as well. It was like 6 a.m. in Gaza. I was in Brazil at that time, so it was like 1 a.m. in Brazil. So, and the connection was really bad. And we finished because his cell battery died. So
Yeah.
I'm still having to contact him for the second part of the interview. But he's been attacked so much. And I asked him one thing, and I'm going to ask you the same thing, but of course, completely different situations. I asked him if he was afraid of being killed, if Israeli suddenly sends a commando to his tent and kills him. It can happen. He said, yeah, it can
Of
happen.
course,
I'm
I would
afraid.
be. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
but the
hard.
thing is, Israel chooses who they will kill, who they allow to survive. I don't know which kind of calculation they do, but they're leaving him there because they know where he is. All the platforms pinpoint him everywhere, anytime. So I think he's not important. I don't know why he's still there, but he lost his wife, 3 kids. It's completely so sad. And regarding you do you feel that you could be threatened, or have you get threatened, death threats on because of your work on social media? uh, are you afraid because you're not, of course it's not a joke but it's sarcastic, is that the wrong kind of Jew
Yeah.
going against the Jewish state?
Look, anyone speaking out on behalf of the Palestinian people is putting themselves in danger, or at least in some ways at risk. But look, in my case, um, I'm very blessed. I'm very lucky. I'm very fortunate. I haven't really had to deal with that. I'm sure people threaten me all the time online. I just block them and ignore them. I don't pay attention to those people. Um, I think being Jewish does provide me a certain amount of security. I think the United States government is much, much less likely to harass, arrest, abduct Jews than they are non-Jews. Look at all the people who have been abducted by the United States over the past few months and coming up on a year now. Have you seen any Jews get abducted? Jews enjoy tremendous privilege, especially white Jewish men like myself. We are some of the most privileged people on planet Earth. I mean, find me a group of people more privileged than white U.S. citizens who are Jewish and who are men. I mean, really, just find me a group of people more privileged than that. So you enjoy all kinds of protections and privileges owing to that identity. So if there's anyone that should feel emboldened to speak out and should feel protected, owing to their identity to speak out, it's people like me. So of course, people are gonna, throw ad hominem attacks at me and label me an anti-Semite and call me a capo. But I just block all those people out. I really could care less. I'm gonna keep speaking. I'm not gonna be intimidated. There's nothing you can do to silence me.
Have you been to Palestine?
Yes, many, many times. Yeah, I was just there a few months ago.
Oh, really? How
Yeah.
how was it? Have West Bank? Did you have any contact with those settlers? Like, there's this guy, Jasper is an American journalist who is there, and
Yeah.
it's Andre X.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know. This guy is really in danger. I think, I don't know if he's American. Jasper, no, he's American. He was the guy who took the picture of the settler attacking the old lady
Yeah.
over her head. And I'll put him, Andre X, here. Do you know what do you know about this guy? Do you know him?
I chatted with him, but I've never met him. He is, I believe, a Russian-born Jewish immigrant to Israel. That's my understanding. I'm not sure where he's based. I think he might be based in Bethlehem, but he moves around a lot. Obviously, he's constantly working with Palestinians in the West Bank, acting as a kind of protective shield. I think is what it's
Yeah.
called, protective presence. So you go, you stay, you spend the night with them, you spend a week with them, you just live life with them because your presence protects them. That's
Yeah,
the
but he's
idea.
been attacked as well.
Of course, he gets attacked all the time. I mean, he's got arrested. He's constantly being arrested. He's constantly being attacked, physically attacked. Yeah, he's always on video showing off a bruise, smacked in the head, beaten up. I mean, that's his daily life. I mean, he's putting himself in harm's way. I mean, he has accepted the challenge and has endures a credible amount of violence against him for the work he does. So God bless his soul. He's doing important work.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. So, Zach, I'd like to thank you very, very much for this conversation. I hope this is the first one, like an introduction about many things, because we need to be educated about what's going on. And I'm so happy that you were able to talk to me and explain a little bit and share your experience about all of this stuff. So, thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me, Carlos. My pleasure.